I really like this paragraph here that kind of
Right.
divides papers into different tiers and then gives
Right.
you metrics on who would be at risk based on the tier of paper.
This is about subscribers. Let's hear it first and then discuss.
How to identify and keep at-risk subscribers. This episode of Today in News Tech is made possible with audio articles by ourhometown.com. Today, we're highlighting a piece by Mark Jacob over at the Northwestern Local News Institute about the measures papers are taking to help retain subscribers that are less engaged. The article, Medill's new index, puts spotlight on rescuing at-risk subscribers, discusses strategies to identify and keep at-risk subscribers. At-risk subscribers are customers that are currently paying for your service but visiting the site 2 or fewer times a month, meaning they're likely to unsubscribe. 20% of digital-only subscribers did not visit the website they were paying for even once a month, fitting the definition of what industry slang calls zombie subscribers. The best way to retain at-risk subscribers is to keep in contact with them with things like emails, social media, and text messages. Remind them to keep coming back to the site so they feel like their subscription is valuable. Deep discounts can help inflate first-time subscription numbers to the point where the churn of at-risk subscribers becomes less impactful on subscription revenue. Identifying at-risk subscribers goes beyond just looking at site visits. See where people are reading on every platform, including newsletters, apps, and social media engagement. Gaining new subscribers is very important, but keeping them around is just as vital. Because of this, Our Hometown developed our WordPress platform to have the capability to track your site analytics and monitor reader engagement.
This is a recurring theme, a bunch of things that we just talked about in a recent story. The stat that I want to focus on and maybe develop a product around is the 2 or fewer visits per month. That's what they call a zombie subscriber. That's a good number, man. It just makes perfect sense. So what we could maybe do, we're tracking all the stats for the subscribers. Once they log in, then we can tie their email to their IP and things like that. And so we know when they're coming in, and we could just have some kind of flag on the user. The question is, what do they do next to rescue them? But this would be the kind of beginning of it. And we would provide those suggestions on how they could bring them back in. But the article goes into them. Did you want to go through some of these stats, Tyler?
I thought the more detailed numbers were really interesting. I just didn't want to get too stats heavy in the post, but I really like this paragraph here that kind of divides papers into different tiers and then gives you metrics on who would be at risk based on the tier of paper.
Okay, so that's the number that they would consider at risk. Wow. 0 right in on tier 3, right? That's the small outlets, or maybe tier 2 for some of our publishers. It's 96% monthly retention rate. So they're saying at the beginning of the month, compared to the end, you still have 96% of them. That's the highest of all the tiers, it looks like.
I think the key number there is they're only visiting every 10 and a half days.
It's saying they come back 10 different days of the month.
Yes.
Wow.
So I would say anyone dipping below that would be in the at-risk category.
Okay, for our customers, it's 10 or fewer. Wow. Interesting. That sounds about right, because an average paper is a weekly in print. We put out their paper, send out the newsletter. People come in for that once a week, and then they're coming in from social media, maybe another 1 or 2 times a week to hit that minimum. If they're really engaged, then they're actively just pulling up the site unprompted. But this is like the minimum. Right. They have some kind of call to action. It's an email, newsletter, or a post on Facebook. That's kind of cool. We do have our bases covered with that, I think. All right. Any other comments on this?
I like the next paragraph down there that says your local news is a one-stop shop. So there is value in being a small community newspaper.
It's a one-stop shop, and it's got unique content. That's the only place you can go for local news, local events, and sports in many communities. But then they're saying many of them are providing kind of that international or national news. I don't think a lot of our publishers do. I would say that's not as important, in my opinion. But I could be wrong. Do you want to be rewriting national stories and publishing it? Or are we talking about linking off site and just being an aggregator? Because that could be valuable and not take a lot of time. I don't know.
The national news that attracts attention in local newspapers is the national news that you don't find anywhere else. It's the hidden news, the feel-good stuff.
That's kind of unique content.
Right, true.
It sounds like people are not talking about it as much because it doesn't, if it bleeds, it leads. If it's inflammatory, it's going to get a lot of traction on social media. But you're talking about just, the positive national news that maybe has some kind of connection to the community. I mean, I just feel like it's all got to have that lens, an advantage that newspapers have right out of the gate. And we got to just take advantage of it. Identifying the less loyal. Was this one of the other main points? You want to go through any stats in here?
Here's that 27% visited 2 days or fewer. 36 were 7 days or fewer. 48, 15 days or fewer. So I think just breaking it down into those tiers could also be really useful.
On the story that we read about zombie subscriptions, it was like a bell-shaped curve, and some standard deviation on the low end is considered a zombie, and they're saying that ends up being about 27% of the average newspaper.
All else equal, I'd rather have somebody who visits every day and reads one article than someone who visits once a week and reads 7. Those two people provide the same number of page views, but the one who has a habit of daily usage is going to be a better retained customer, generally speaking.
That's a really good perspective on this. And so what can we do to encourage that? Send out more newsletters and post on social media every day, right?
Right. And that's more or less what they get to down here. Just remind them that your content's there at every step. Don't let them forget that they're subscribing, and make them interact with it so that they don't feel like they're losing money.
Yes, I love that point. I'm always making that argument for the newsletter.
Remind your customers of the value.
Right. And that's through editorial, directly doing it, with the words that you're using and the way that you frame that donate button, but it's also just the frequency that you're communicating. And we saw this in some old episodes on Today in News Tech. Daily podcasts are significantly more successful than weekly or monthly. And it's just something about that frequency that gets you access to a significantly bigger audience. Another article from, I think it was Local News Initiative also, just saying how weekly newspapers can be weekly in print, but they need to be daily in digital. For us, we view it as like the news is new. We want to get it out on the website as soon as possible, but you can still market it over time and spread it out over the course of the week on social media so that you
specifically when you're targeting people that haven't interacted with it yet.
And that's mainly going to be the social media audience. The newsletter is going to go out immediately when we publish the new edition. So the people that are subscribers and that are really engaged will probably see it right away. It's widening the funnel, just increasing engagement as much as possible. Any other points on this one we want to make?
I mean, I think my only final point, which ties into the reaching out to people regularly, is that's only half of the equation, because when you're sending out things like social media posts, newsletters, that kind of thing, you also need to be keeping track of whether or not people are actually opening them.
Yeah, and then tweaking how you design the newsletter, the frequency, maybe you break up the audience a little bit. I mean, this is something that we could be doing with our newsletter. I realized years ago that the communication with our customers wasn't what it needed to be. And so now we have a weekly newsletter, and I feel so good about that. I really think it's gone a long way in retention purely for the education. It's showing our customers what we do, highlighting things that they maybe never knew about. Retaining a customer is always cheaper than getting a new one.
Thanks for watching Today in News Tech, the podcast covering innovation in digital journalism. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and subscribe on YouTube or any of your favorite podcast apps. We'll see you tomorrow.
At our hometown, we help newspapers build WordPress websites, design native apps, and develop digital subscription models. If you are interested in a free prototype of your publication on WordPress, go to ourhometown.com and click the Contact Us button.